And our meeting tonight is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy.
I'm very grateful to be a member of this church and for all the blessings that Christian Science has brought into my life. Before coming to Plainfield, I spent a lot of time reading and learning, but for what purpose I had no idea. I wanted to take action, to do something meaningful, but I didn't know what the right step forward was. It took arriving here for me to realize that there was a legitimate reason for much of that reading. And it wasn't to pad my resume or to make me a better employee or husband or anything else. God had a plan for me and a place, and it was here at this church, which I have to say was a very big surprise. I think of that a lot because so much of my day-to-day is doing things He prepared me for years ago. I thought for so long I was completely aimless and godless, and yet the whole time He had me pointed towards this church and He never left my side. This gives me so much hope and peace because I know He is doing that for everyone everywhere, and it gives me great joy to think of all those moving parts of His coming together to bless all. Hope and peace and joy and purpose were not traits I possessed much of before coming into Christian Science, but I feel them constantly now. What a wonderful blessing this is. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Candy from Wisconsin, go ahead.
Good evening. Tonight, I would like to express my gratitude for God, Mary Baker Eddy, my practitioner, and especially this church. I really appreciate the round tables with their very helpful, constant reminders of what is the truth. They really help keep God foremost in my thoughts. Yesterday, I'd been having a problem with my eyes. But after last night's Unity Watch, I noticed the problem was all gone. Mary Baker Eddy says in Prose Works, "Rest assured, the good you do unto others, you do to yourself as well." And also in Science and Health, whatever blesses one, blesses all. And I was truly blessed. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. I wish to express my gratitude for the lovely prelude. It was just outstanding. Also, I would like to express my gratitude for a rapid healing I recently had. I have not had a cold for maybe a year or so, and I got up with a cough and sore throat. And it was suggested that I read I've Got Cold from Prose Works, which of course I did. And of course it started to settle down immediately. However, I was very, very hoarse and was unable to give a testimony last Wednesday. So I'm giving it tonight. I am most grateful for this rapid healing of a cold. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
Good evening. I'd like to testify of an experience I had about 6 years ago, which I think of often, and which demonstrated God's nearness, the subject of the readings tonight. Thank you, Fairley. It's something that took me a while to understand until I came to Plainfield. I was driving home from a trip along an interstate. It was a 5-hour drive, and during part of this time, I was singing hymns and reciting some citations from the Bible. The one I remember reciting was from Proverbs. "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." I was driving in the left-hand lane and going about 75 miles an hour. I passed an exit, and at the same time, a semi-truck was exiting onto the highway. He passed me on the right and then proceeded to move into my lane as if I wasn't there. This happened so quickly, and I had no choice but to swing the car violently to the left to avoid him hitting and crushing me. The car spun, and I did a 360 in the left lane of the highway, and then the car backed into the median. At the time, I was shaking, and I believe I was in shock. Another trucker had seen what happened and stopped to assist me. The car's tires were stuck in the mud, so I couldn't move, but the car was not damaged at all. Eventually, a state trooper came by and was able to maneuver the car out of the mud, and I was able to travel back home. At the time, I thought perhaps I was pretty lucky to escape what could have been serious injury or death. I think I thought that because at the instant it occurred, I didn't utter any truths, so I didn't attribute the protection to God. But over the years, I've come to understand this experience, much to the credit of the teachings here. My focus on singing those hymns and reciting those Bible verses in the hours prior had kept me in a secret place, protected in love's arms. A practitioner here told me it was my surplus thinking which was focused on God, not off in la-la land somewhere. So the protection didn't just happen, though some might try to insist that. Because how else could it be? You see, at that moment, there was no car traveling behind me as I swerved, and there was no fence in the median area, so there was nothing for me to hit. It was just a wide stretch of grass separating one side of the highway from the other. And God had given me the impetus to act immediately, resulting in no injury to me and no scratch on the car. I didn't give God as much credit as he deserved in the moments after that happened and in the months following. I was very focused on the event itself. But I do now cherish this experience and have since thanked God many, many, many times over for his protection that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the beautiful readings tonight and the beautiful service and all the teachings that are at this church. A recent exchange in one of our classes about the greatness of the Blue Book jogged my memory back to the time when I left my class association. A family member exhibited coughing spells to the degree of not being able to breathe. It was the first time in my experience in Christian Science that practitioner help wasn't able to rectify the issue. So trying personally different ideas of what I understood of Christian Science at that time, nothing seemed to bring relief. I don't recall at this point how long in time this continued before one day a scientist friend sent me a compilation of statements on electricity, which I assume were quotes from our dear leader, Mary Baker Eddy. I remembered that I had seen items on this topic in the Blue Book, which I wasn't that familiar with, but it has so many incredible statements of Mrs. Eddy's gathered from a variety of sources. I looked up all the items about electricity, and since the Blue Book Concordance doesn't give the line number, only the page, I'd read all that was there on the page and then be so engrossed I would usually read more. To be frank, I can't say that I understood all or even much of what I read. I just knew I had to keep reading because at that point the family member began to improve. I already had a great love and reverence for Mrs. Eddy. This experience gave me great trust in the depth of a revelation of truth that is contained in the Blue Book. After months of pondering and praying the best I could, I was led to jump off that current ship of Christian Science I was on, mid-ocean, so to speak, in search of the real thing to be able to practice scientifically, because I knew I had to figure out how to do this myself. And this finally led me to this Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. I'm so grateful to be given basics here of how to correct my thinking and how to listen to God, which was missing completely, and now feel like I'm headed in the right direction, onward and upward, due to the better understanding of the teachings of the prophets, Christ Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy, that I'm learning at this church. I'm so grateful to be here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dede from Georgia. Go ahead.
Thank you. This week I had an important meeting scheduled for today, and though I confirmed it on Monday, I didn't feel that today was the right time for it to happen. There were many reasons for this, but instead of reasoning on and on, I asked God if it was something that needed to happen and that His will be done. I had the strong thought to go ahead and cancel, and even though many negative suggestions were presented as to what I would be losing, what I would be missing, and how the other person would respond or be affected, I continued to pray for what I should do. I ended up sending a message to request a cancellation late last night, and this morning I had received a very understanding and receptive response from the other person. I'm sure this was a healing for the both of us, and it was more proof of how God cares for and protects everyone, and how we see this protection clearer the more that we trust in Him. I'm so grateful for all that I'm learning in this church that's teaching me to trust God more with all things in my life, and the result of doing so. Thank you, Fairley, for tonight's readings, and thank you for all the testimonies given so far. I'm grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
One of the many things that I have learned in Christian Science in this church, for which I'm grateful, is a better understanding of what success is. We all want to succeed at something. And I have to admit, when I first got to Plainfield a few years ago, I had a very worldly concept of what success was. I thought of it as, succeeding in a job or a career or making more money or things like that, the way the world measures success. And I found myself feeling driven, anxious, and at times quite unhappy with this concept of what I was trying to achieve. So finally I got to where I had to ask a practitioner in this church, a Christian Science practitioner, about it because it was bothering me so much. And the first thing the practitioner asked me was, well, where is God in all of this? Does this bless anyone? And it was then that I began to realize that success is nothing like what the world tells you success is. It's not even close. And since then, and with the help of this practitioner in Christian Science, I have learned that success is pleasing and obeying God. Period. It's that simple. And after wrestling for quite a long time and coming to this very simple realization, has made a huge change for the better in my life. I no longer feel driven. I am much, much happier and much more peaceful. I feel I've been freed from a very destructive, false concept of success that could have been very damaging, could have ruined my life if I hadn't been lifted out of it by Christian Science and with the help of this practitioner. My family and I lack nothing because God has taken very good care of us. And for that, I am very, very grateful. So I thank God and a really good Christian Science practitioner in this church for showing me what success really is. And I'm so grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Edith from California, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to express my gratitude also. I thank God because I found Christian Science. Originally, the reason why I started to study Christian Science is because I was seeking for healing for my son. The more I study, the more I listen, the more I read, and the more I practice, I learned that I'm the one that needs the healing. It's my mind, the one that needs to be renewed. And that's what's going on right now. And I am so grateful for this. My son is doing great. He's just doing wonderful, enjoying his life the way that he should be. I'm so grateful for Christian Science, for this church, for everything that you provide, for all the testimonies, for the readings tonight. Thank you for everything. I thank God for you all. And have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Chardell.
Good evening, and I'm happy to be here with all of you also. And I thank you for the readings on God's nearness and for our hymns. Tonight, I am grateful for my practitioner's prayers and how speedily comes her reply when I reach out for help. Not long ago, after working pretty hard physically, I had sharp pain that was new and went right up my back. I soon called my practitioner and was directed to pages 390 to 393 in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, and also to remember that I am not made up of muscles. I knew that I had to pray about the belief of aging and how this false view about me couldn't stop me from being active, vigorous, and strong, and not to hold any resentment about not receiving enough assistance from my family. I am grateful for help when it comes and do what I can. Within a few days, all was well, and I have resumed hauling wood for our wood stove and used wisdom to decide how many loads to bring into the house. Mrs. Eddy was so wise in teaching us all about how to approach everything in our lives from a spiritual point of view, just as the Christ taught, and I am very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening. I'd like to express gratitude tonight for a statement given to me by a practitioner from this church last week. The statement she gave me is from Science and Health, page 15. It says, quote, "To enter into the heart of prayer, the door of the erring senses must be closed. Lips must be mute and materialism silent, that man may have audience with spirit, the divine principle love, which destroys all error." Unquote. I worked with this during the day, but it was the next morning that I found it very useful. I have a tendency to talk too much, and sometimes in the early morning I talk to myself. Well, that morning I was talking to myself, and part of the citation given to me came to thought, lips must be mute. You can't hear God if you're talking. I stopped talking immediately and settled down to reading and found myself feeling very calm and peaceful. I have used this several times since then with the same result. I'm so grateful for this experience, for practitioner help, for the Plainfield Church, and for Christian Science. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Bruce. I'm very thankful for our magazine, Love is the Liberator. And I'd also like to mention that we have on our website a library of all of the past issues, including the current issue, which is featured on the homepage. Well, I was just reading through the current issue and loving every word, and I came across this statement, and it says, "To be wronged is nothing unless you continue to remember it." And the author on that is unknown. And reading that, it made me so thankful for this church and Christian Science. I'd had a history of remembering of how I was wrong and renewing the anguish every time I remembered it. Now, it's not God's plan for anyone to be in anguish. So the lesson for me was to learn the lesson from it and get on top of it and not experience that anguish, which is not God's plan for anyone. There was a time a few years ago when I called a practitioner from this church because I was really troubled because there was something happened. I perceived that I was wrong from it, and I was just at wit's end as to what to do. And the practitioner said, "Well, rise up now, because God didn't send this experience for you to just be in anguish. He didn't send this experience at all, but you can learn something from it. And the first one is forgiveness. You forgive that wrong. And the second one is you think about how much stronger and wiser you are now for having gone through this experience. But you went through it and learned the lesson. The lesson's learned, so the experience is past and gone. Let's move on forward with forgiveness and increased wisdom." My anguish was released entirely with that conversation with this practitioner. I'm endlessly thankful for the truth that was spoken to me. And it was a healing truth. And I went on without being disturbed or troubled or having lost anything as a result of this experience that was bothering me so badly. And I thank God for it. I thank God for Christian Science. Linda.
Thank you very much for the readings tonight. I'd like to express my gratitude for the many blessings that come from participating at Plainfield Independent Church and the opportunity to be part of something that is blessing and healing the world. These activities have been teaching me discipline, how to be watchful, how to get myself out of God's way and to listen to Him, patience, and to learn from my mistakes. A little while ago, I was very uncomfortable with symptoms of a cold. I had some work for church to do, and I do find this work very centering. Every time I do it, it just has a way of really, I feel, putting me in the right state of thought and my mind on God. So I'm very grateful for that. I knew the project was the right thing to do, so I quietly sat down and began the task. After about an hour, I completed this particular job, and not long after that, I realized that all the symptoms had vanished. In the past, these same symptoms could have lasted for days or even longer. I'm so grateful to be witness to how practical the Christian Science is and how we can trust God's care. I'm very grateful for all I'm learning here for our Christ Jesus, Mrs. Eddy, and this church.
Thank you. Sharon.
Several weeks ago, there was a situation in our office where one of our clients sent us a check that was $45,000 overpayment. The girl that found it went to our manager, and our manager asked me to cut a check to this company. The people did not want the main office to know this mistake had been made because the girl would have lost her job. So we made the check, and I was given the address, but it was of the main office, which I was not aware of. And then the manager told me to mail the check, which I did. And I took it to the mailbox, but the mail person had already came. So the girl that found the mistake came to me and said, "Do you have the check?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I mailed it." And she said, "Oh, no, it wasn't supposed to be mailed. The sales manager was supposed to take it to the branch." So there was a situation. So we all started praying, and we didn't know how it would work out, but we knew God was in control. The next day, the girl who had found the mistake was talking to the receptionist, and the mail carrier came in, and he overheard part of the conversation. He went out to his truck, brought a box of mail in, and he went through the mail, and the first piece of mail he held up that had our company name on it. He said, "Is this the check you're looking for?" And she said, "Yes." And he handed it to her. Everybody just thanked God. That never would have happened without God in control. And I'm just so grateful for what I've learned in this church, to know with God all things are possible. We don't have to try to figure out how to do it or anything like that. We couldn't go and tamper with the mail because that's illegal. But the way it worked out, it was perfectly fine. I'm just so grateful for what I'm learning in this church, for all the practitioner help, and how everybody was blessed by this experience. Thank God, and thank Verily for the beautiful readings tonight.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Fairly, for the beautiful readings on God's nearness, the hymns, and the music before the service. I am so grateful to God for learning through science that He is that close to all of us at all times. In fact, somebody told me that if God is not here, you wouldn't be here. And that thought I have held to reassure myself that no matter what, no matter where I am, He is there. And this thought has been so comforting. I have learned over the years that really to practice that God is with me is very powerful. Because God is with me means the truth is with me with all its power and authority to remove all the false senses that can keep me afraid, worried, anxious. All of that can go when I really live day to day knowing that God is with me. And I've said it many, many, many times. It brings such comfort to me. Mrs. Eddy in Science and Health has the question, is there more than one God or principle? Answer, there is not. Principle and its idea is one. And this one is God, omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent being, and His reflection is man and the universe. We can't be more closer to God than as being His reflection. Everyone or anyone who is feeling afraid, please remember you are that close to our loving Father, Mother God. Thank God for all the testimonies which attest to this truth. So glad that this truth goes out to everyone who is seeking and will comfort, uplift, and heal those who are ready. So grateful for this service tonight. Thank God, thank Christ Jesus' example, Mary Baker Eddy. I'm happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
I have a few things to read. The first from Virginia, testimony. I was very inspired by our round table this past Sunday and conversation regarding healings that aren't instantaneous. I'd like to share with you my experience of a more prolonged healing, whereas I am still at times in some discomfort with this problem. It has forced me to dig deep and really look at myself and my relationship to God with serious intent. I'm learning so much more about Mrs. Eddy in Christian Science and how I should be thinking and living. I also want to encourage anyone who hasn't had a quick healing to hold out for all the blessings that come from a deeper study and more urgent listening. I'm quite sure that when the total manifestation of the healing is here, I will look back and bless this whole experience as I am blessing it now. These round tables and Bible studies fill me with inspiration and food for thought. Thank you to Plainfield, my practitioner, Mrs. Eddy, and Christian Science. And then from our church website bulletin board, also Virginia. Recently, I became aware of what might be considered an alarming thought that is being introduced into our country and its governing body on a new system of government that our country should adopt. I found myself getting caught up in this disturbing thought and knew I had to reestablish peace in my thinking and to not break the first commandment by giving power to this error. At that point, I turned to two powerful resources on our website to reestablish what is true and what is really going on in the present. Bicknell Young's writing entitled The United States of America, which is found on our website and is read by Gary Singletary, is very powerful. Mr. Singletary reads with forthrightness, strength, and conviction, and it is evidenced by this audio presentation. My other resource was a Wednesday evening meeting presented on May 30th, 2018. The topic was entitled, God's Ever-Present Law, the Only Authority and Power Over All Creation and the Universe. These readings were strong statements of truth as to who is really in control of all, and Amanda, who put this program together, also read with the same qualities as the previously mentioned speaker: strength, forthrightness, clarity, and conviction. These two resources speak for themselves in reestablishing the truth and destroying the blatant lie for our country and for all mankind. The beacon light of truth is shining brightly to all mankind from this church and its website. This is an incredible gift from God and Mary Baker Eddy, the discoverer and founder of Christian Science. And then Florida. Thank you for another inspiring issue of Love is the Liberator. I appreciate all of the hard work and dedication that goes into the publishing each month. Reading Mrs. Eddy's powerful poem, Laus Deo, on laying the cornerstone of the Mother Church, reminded me of the Laus Deo inscribed on the east capstone of the Washington Monument. I found comfort in knowing that Laus Deo, the Latin phrase for praise be to God, is inscribed on the tallest structure, 555 feet, in our nation's capital. Imagine, as the sun rises each morning, those glorious rays touch that loving decree to mankind. Praise be to God. God's government is in control. The monument points upward to the source of all life, love, and truth. That is beautiful. I did not know that. It's very encouraging about our nation's capital. Thank you so much for those beautiful readings tonight. It was such a wonderful service to be with everyone. Beautiful hymns as well. In our lesson this week in the responsive reading, there's a simple statement, and in Psalms, I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. That word sought means to endeavor to find or gain by any means. And when we truly seek to find our Father, Mother, God, we will find his nearness and his dearness with us. And all our fears will be removed in his tremendous love that he has for each and every one of us. Several months ago, I had quite a painful sensation on the bottom of my foot. It felt almost as if I was walking on broken glass. At first it was just sporadic, but then it became constant. And I was working quite diligently on it, and at that time I turned to Teaching and Addresses, page 130, Treatment for Pain. When mesmerized by pain, turn and say, I know what you are. This is not pain or a belief of pain. It is a belief of mind in matter, a lie of belief without a believer, nothingness claiming to be something. I am not afraid. I am spiritual and so immune. That was such a powerful statement to me. And I addressed this pain in that way, knowing that I couldn't be mesmerized by it, and that it was a belief of life in matter. And that arrested my attention, and I began to pray more earnestly as to how I might be thinking that my life was in matter, and it's certainly something that creeps up every day. And to pay more attention to that and to correct it, to know that my life was never in matter. I wasn't born into matter. I will not die out of it. I am God's image and likeness, spiritual. And as this said, spiritual, therefore immune. And in working diligently with that statement, in just a few days after having a very chronic attack of this, whatever it was, the pain stopped. I am so grateful. It was such sure proof of the truth of this statement. I'm so grateful to all our early workers, such as Edward Kimball. I'm so grateful to Mrs. Eddy for giving us our textbook and prose works. I'm grateful for Christian Science, such a wonderful way of life, and whatever fear we might have, when we seek the Lord, He delivers us from it. Grateful to be with you all tonight.
Thank you.